Moving on, let's look in more detail at neuron structure and function. Sensory neurons, relay neurons, and motor neurons are the three types of neurons that make up the nervous system. The sensory neurons carry information from sensory organs, such as your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, to the brain and spinal cord. Relay neurons, also known as interneurons, connect sensory neurons to motor neurons or other relay neurons. And finally, motor neurons transmit information from the brain and spinal cord to the muscles and glands. Synaptic transmission is the process by which neurons communicate with each other. When an action potential reaches the end of a neuron, it triggers the release of neurotransmitters into the synaptic gap, the space between the neurons. The neurotransmitters diffuse, so pass across the gap, and bind to receptor sites on the postsynaptic neuron. This binding can either excite or inhibit the postsynaptic neuron, depending on the type of neurotransmitter and receptor involved. Excitation occurs when a neurotransmitter binding to a receptor site on the postsynaptic neuron causes the neuron to depolarize, making it more likely to fire an action potential. Inhibition, on the other hand, occurs when a neurotransmitter binding to a receptor site on the postsynaptic neuron causes the neuron to hyperpolarize, making it less likely to fire an action potential. Neurotransmitters are most likely to be either inhibitive or excitatory, less likely to fire or more likely to fire. After neurotransmitters have performed their function, they are either broken down by enzymes or can be taken back up into the presynaptic neuron in a process called reuptake. These processes interact to facilitate communication between neurons, allowing for the transmission of information throughout the nervous system. Hebb's theory of learning is based on the idea that when two neurons are activated at the same time, the connection between them is strengthened. This process is known as Hebbian learning, and it is thought to underlie many forms of learning and memory. Hebb was very much ahead of his time, as his book called Organization of Behavior was published in 1949. According to Hebb, learning and memory involve changes in the strength of synaptic connections between neurons. When two neurons are activated at the same time, the synaptic connection between them is strengthened, making it more likely that they will fire together in the future. Over time, this repeated activation of this pathway can lead to the formation of new connections between neurons, and these can then be strengthened throughout further activity. These pathways are known as engrams. Hebb also proposed that the growth of new connections between neurons is facilitated by the release of neurotrophic factors, which are chemicals that promote the growth and survival of neurons. These factors are released in response to activity in the brain, and they help to reinforce the connections between neurons that are involved in learning and memory. Overall, Hebb's theory of learning and neuronal growth suggests that learning and memory are based on the strengthening and growth of synaptic connections between neurons, which are facilitated by the release of neurotrophic factors in response to activity in the brain.